This was very hard for us to narrow down. If you know anything about France, it's very passionate. So we are going to try our best, but also provide a range of options. And these are by no means the only picture books around gender here in our library or in the world.
So the first thing I want to point out, this is close to the pinnacle of publishing around gender identity. It was a book that was published last year. And what kids love about it, which is really what we're going to be focusing on, that it is clear, it is concise, and they recognize themselves in the pages. I read this book recently with third graders, and they noticed the pattern, just as our GSA, about which Carly will say more, noticed that in terms of terminology, there's a reinforcement. So I'm just going to read 1 or 2 pages. I'll be very brief and short. She's a transgender girl. This is Ruthie. She is a transgender girl. That means when she was born, everyone thought she was a boy until she grew a little older, old enough to tell everyone that she's actually a girl. Girl is Ruthie's gender identity. And so the book goes through. So this is Xavier, who is a cisgender boy, and again, boy is Xavier's gender identity. It makes the point too that we bring all our identities. This is maybe one aspect of ourselves, and there are many, many ways for us to be in the world. It reinforces the notion of being non-binary. And the illustrations are arresting. When I showed this book, third graders said, "Oh, Teresa Thorne." That's how invested kids are in terms of looking at books. Teresa Thorne, she has a podcast. And I went home and checked it out. Sure enough, she does. So what I love about it is that it already tells us something about, gives us a window in terms of the work that you are doing at home. We love the fact that this book is standing on the shoulders of other books.
You can pass that one around.
Yeah, and let's pass this around. Yeah.
When you see the little sticky notes around, they may be Miss Martindale's notes, but they may be notes from our young children or older kids about what they liked or things they noticed. So if you see some sticky notes in front or on the pages, that's what that's about.
Yeah, there's one point in there where, and I think Jennifer has it right now, where a child is explaining who he is to his parents. And on the other page it says, oops, meaning that his parents did not know at that point. And when I read that, there was both recognition for children and there was also a sense of, being in the know. So when Carly referenced that sometimes our kids know more than us, that is also something that the picture book authors are deliberate about capturing on the pages. And it's important. We love these 2 books, first of all, because A House for Everyone shows our children outside. It's 5 children building a stick house together. It could be Elf Village over here. And they're bringing their separate identities to their work, but also working communally. And this is from Hurst in Australia, which again is to show you deliberately the global aspect of the work that is being done here, but also the connections that we feel with other individuals. Who Are You was groundbreaking a couple of years ago. If you are somebody who likes a tactile experience, there is a gender identity wheel. What we want you to notice about these books are that they are 97% written by individuals who have experience in terms of their families or their work in terms of working with, or they may themselves be trans or maybe gender creative. And the other thing that we want you to note is the back matter in each of these books, which gives really clear material for having conversation with kids. how we have conversation with the little ones all the way through is that we talk all the way through. I stop, we look at faces, we hear reactions. Sometimes kids will just go like this when they recognize that it's a classmate for whom some aspect of their gender identity is affirmed. And that's important because that's about creating an empathic community.
And those 3 books that are going around right now not only have great tips and resources in the back for adults, but they also are about terminology. So it's a good place to start for you as a learner, but for also kids who are like, well, what do you mean when you say boy? Like, what are they talking about? Or if I dress like this, does that mean my gender identity is different? So we started with these 3 on purpose because they're kind of an overview of terminology.
The next book that I'm showing you, you may well have seen before, and this is Jazz Jennings, youth activist, transgender child, and this is Jazz's experience, written, I believe, when she was 8 or 9 with her family, and with Jessica Purple. And the significance of it is that it is a transgender child, but it's also a point of access for all children. So a mermaid lover who's looking for, never enough books about mermaids within the collection, provides a window, but in the aspect or the unfolding of the book also gets an experience in terms of development of empathy, development of support for a very, very young child. What you'll be noticing in the picture books as they come around, and especially, this is an early book, I believe it's 2014,
Yes.
And what you'll be noticing about it is that, again, there's a focus in places on the child's awareness, sometimes in addition to the parents' growing awareness, and sometimes it's ahead. And you want to see that in the book, because it is the reality, and children know when they know, and we also need to make sure that we are celebrating that. When Aidan became a brother is the book that won the Stonewall Award, that is given for an awareness again of books that promote an understanding and that are exemplary in terms of looking at LGBTQ, and in this case, a transgender child. This is a book that backs so beautifully with our curriculum in early childhood and also with lower school. And Aidan, who was identified as female when born, when he's very, very young, informs his parents that he is indeed transgender. And for Aidan, what is really, really important about it is that family members are thinking about what that means. And so his mother, there's big news in the family, there's a baby that's going to be born, and suddenly Aidan's concern is that this child not have the same experience. And so everywhere he goes with his parents, the world is focusing on gender. What are you going to have? What is it? Are you expecting a boy or a girl? And so he takes the agency and he creates a new baby book and modifies the front. Instead of the 50,000 names, it's just a focus on a baby. And that, again, is powerful for children who are used in this school to being introduced and supported in terms of beginning understanding of terminology, but also of the use of pronouns. We've also shown you here 2 books that are clearly about animals. Introducing Teddy is actually about a teddy bear and a child. And sometimes we wrestle with that in terms of should we just be putting books out about children? But there's something about the comfort of this piece for a very, very young child that then dovetails really beautifully with some of the successive books that are coming up. And I've seen middle schoolers return to introducing Teddy. This is a new book that was published very recently, and it's Bunny Bear, and it is about being non-binary, and it's about expressing who you are. It's got delicious language in it, which kids immediately respond to. It's got fabulous pictures, yeah, and so if anybody wants to hold the book up and show, yeah. And it's about a meeting, literally, in the woods between a bunny and a bear, and the bear who wants to be a bunny, and the bunny who wants to be a grizzly bun. And there's also a point at which they bring their community along with them in the same way that you'll see in some of these books. It will open up conversation with children. Do you ever feel, Miss Martinell, sometimes I feel like I just want to be grumpy, so there's a social emotional piece that is there, but again, it is seeding the foundation for the work that we're doing about gender identity.
You find also with the young kids that using animals or like a friend and an animal can be an easy way to take it a little bit less about people and like their own gender identity, but just saying, I love that introducing Teddy underneath says a gentle story about gender and friendship, and that's exactly what it is, of how to be a good friend. And sure, I'll hang out with Teddy whether Teddy wears a bow tie or a bow on their head. So it's less about the human in that book, but really just about being a compassionate friend, no matter what their gender or gender expression may look like.
And we always ask all our kids, actually, at the end of each book, what is that book really about, which will often get really tightly in tune with this subject matter, and also with that beginning to understand theme. And that can be really important. We love this as a gender expressive book. And this is an example of when you will see notes from children. And sometimes it's just emphatic. The boy wanted to wear a dress like a girl, and it was fine. and that's important. We want our kids to be noticing that it's not somebody who is on the outside. It's somebody who needs to be included, and it's somebody who needs to be celebrated. This is a book that we have used in Beloved Community Day because it is about members of a family who are supporting their child. And what I love is that when I read this in early childhood and through lower school, whether you identify, if you happen to be cisgender boy, you will sometimes show me your fingernails, and that you like sparkle too. And again, that is really empowering for us all. Many of these books, especially It Feels Good to Be Yourself, we have a trans male son, and he just looked at us the other day and said, wait a minute, where were these books when I was at Gordon? So that is something that I think is powerful, whether, again, you're in middle school, whether you're in college, that there is beginning to be critical mass now. It's still not enough. And our job as librarians and teachers and educators and parents is to source these books. So What Riley Wore is new. It was new in 2019. It's part of our Gazumpa. And again, this is a gender creative child. I love to say a gender euphoric child, because this is literally about Riley going through their week and deciding what to wear and what to put on and what to maybe not put on that day. In the center is Jacob's new dress, which is earlier, not too much earlier, and you can find all the publishing dates on your handouts. But again, this is about a child who is gender creative, gender expansive, and wants to wear a dress, and it's where his parents happen to be with that. Not quite there at the moment, but within a few pages, knowing that this is really important to their child. Kids respond beautifully to this, in the sense, when I say beautifully, that they get it. And that's what you want with any picture book that you're reading. You want to see how well they work. This year there is a book that looks at access to a bathroom. And I mention that because in hearing Jazz Jennings speak once, she talked about the people who kept her within her school, from the bathroom of choice as a child, and some of the consequences that had. So to see books that are pushing past what was once gendered and not thought to be appropriate, horrible word, or acceptable for a child, can only be affirming. We also love Annie's Plaid Shirt. And this was a book, and some of the books you'll see come through publishers, some of them are self-published. And Annie's has won a Mum's Choice Award. And again, this is about a child who wants to just wear what she wants to wear. And it's about that tussle with a family around a wedding, and it's about the child's inventive. It doesn't always have to be the child, by the way, who has to invent and change the aspect or the understanding of the family. But so often in books it has been. There's somebody that you should know in the resources who is called S. Bear Bergman. And S. Bear Bergman is working out of a trans male who is working out of California, and who has one of the best self-published, almost an enterprise now. And what you're going to see is that you're going to see all sorts of books that again push globally as well as locally into our communities and are reflective of our discussion.
The other thing I like about this group of books is that Annie and Sparkle Boy and Jacob, they're sure about their gender identity. It's actually not their gender identity that is the book is about. It's about their gender expression. It's about what they want to wear, and that's why boy is in the title of the book. And Annie never once in the book questions whether she wants to be a girl or a boy. She just likes to wear plaid shirts and not dresses, and she's adamant about that. So for the kids who are maybe wrestling with the idea around gender expression and what someone wears versus their identity, I think these books can be helpful in that regard.
So Jamie is Jamie is the age range that goes with this book is usually about preschool and up, but also nursery students would love it as well. And what I really value about this book is that if you choose not to use a pronoun to describe yourself, because you are just Jamie, you are Jamie. And so this, when I read this to kids, this is about, again, breaking down the stereotype of who plays with what sort of toys. It's about the moments of going into the aisle as a parent and the binary of pink and blue. And it's about children in their day just playing. So Jamie is new to the community, I just did it, thank you, to the school. And what Jamie does is he shows his classmates just by joining in with dress up, shows his classmates different ways in which to play. And when you ask the kids, what is it about? It's about play. It's about friendship. It's just about Jamie being what he wants to be, Miss Martindale. So these...
Jamie, the gender is never disclosed. They never use a pronoun, so it leads to interesting conversation. I'm like, well, what do you think about Jamie? Like, do you think? Yeah,
that's right. And there's a note in the front of that one too, so you'll see. The Boy in the Bindi by Vivek Shraya is absolutely beautiful. And this is a South Asian story, and it's about a child who wants to wear his mother's bindi, and she gives it to him. And when he puts it on, he is transfused with light and warmth. The illustrations are absolutely beautiful. And he experiences what I can only call a transformation. And so what we love about this book is, just as Carly just referenced, kids know who they are, and this is an expression of it, if you will. It is a metaphor, if you will, for that experience of everything just coming together for you, of this, if you will, of the stars aligning. And this is an important book. And when I went to a conference for the transgender community, an international conference in New York, supported by my school last year, and I ran a book table, this was the book that a lot of people picked up. And just loved.
We Francis and I like that it kind of leaves it open. We don't know, maybe just wearing the bindi is the start of this boy's gender transition. Maybe he just wants to be a boy who wears the bindi. You never know, so you get to have those kind of conversations.
Right.
Similarly.
Yep. So I'm going to be very quick because I see Lynn standing. Yep. So this is...
We all need a timekeeper.
Yep. Julian is a mermaid, meets on the subway 3 mermaids, and goes home and replicates the experience, and it is generational in that his grandmother just gives him the pearls he needs, and it is just beautiful. And again, that's all I'm going to say, but again, it is that moment, and it is about being gender creative.
And last but not least, we have Intersectional Allies, and we thought this was an important book to end on for today before we get into the further resources and tips, because as we know, gender is just one part of our identity, and so these books have amazing resources for parents in the back and a little bit about the authors. I think the illustrations and information in the back is almost better than the book itself, they have even like an intersection wheel, and there's many different visuals for how to show intersectionality, but it clearly shows that we are many things. We don't just walk through the world as one thing, as one gender, or as one race, or as one class, or as one education level. And so this not only can talk about allyship, but maybe you don't identify as someone part of the LGBTQ plus community, but maybe you also are an ally, or maybe you are a member of the LGBTQ community, but you're an ally in other ways, maybe across racial identity or class. So anything specific?
Yeah, and so what I would say too, this is a book that works especially well with middle schoolers and with the upper levels of lower school. And as a parent, and I cannot wait to read this, but I really want to push it out to somebody who would like it. The Bold World by Jodie Patterson is a parent piece that also is about race, intersectionality, and the experience as a parent with a transgender.
All right. Okay. So we have a couple of pictures from our beloved GSA. Looking at some of these books to show that even middle schoolers love picture books and even adults love picture books, and they provided us some lovely commentary about some of the...
Carla, can you just say what the GSA is?
Sure, definitely. So the Gender and Sexuality Alliance, Ms. Paul is far back there, and I co-facilitate it once a week, so Wednesdays during lunch, open for middle schoolers, 5th through 8th grade, and the topics vary per week. They could be brought to us by a student saying, I saw this in the news, or I heard this song, or there's an event coming up, or it could be brought by Tamara or myself of something that might be timely in the kind of school year or annual year. It could be something like this of, hey, we have this event. Would you mind giving us your opinion about the books? What grade? So there's an event coming up in a couple of weeks. Jazz Jennings in one of the books has annual day. It's called Jazz and Friends National Day to read books about gender, and so they wrote letters to all their lower school and early childhood teachers offering to come read one of these books in their class. So it could be something like that. Anything else you want to say about GSA?
Just that we stress with kids, it's an alliance group.
Yeah.
It's not an affinity group
Yeah.
like Common Ground or letting anything about identity
Yeah.
be there. And that attendance is really fluid. So kids can come one week, decide they want to go to recess the next week.
Yeah.
It's just always there for them.
Yeah. Perfect. All right, so I've passed around. I hope they've found their way to you. There's a double-sided handout that has a couple of tips and some sample language, and then also some further resources. So I'm just going to briefly go through the tips for how to answer questions that might come up, whether it's through a book or whether it's just like your day-to-day experience with a young person, and go over a couple of resources, then we'll leave it open to questions. So when I meet with parents, whether it's about the human sexuality or puberty units coming up, or whether it was earlier in the fall with the gender policy or Jennifer Bryan, people wanted well, what do you say, or how do you answer, or where do you begin? So I tried to make it as condensed as possible. The first thing is to just not panic if possible. It's just to breathe, because the fact that a young person is asking you or engaging in conversation is a real privilege, and so to validate them, whether it's, oh, a lot of people are wondering that, or oh, that's a great question, thanks for asking, can be really powerful, because what we know about young people is that they will find their answers somehow, whether it's from their friends, later from the internet, from other books, from hiding in the library, from asking their friends again, and so if they're coming to an adult, that's a really, really good place to start. Whether it's just in casual conversation, you want to make that a teachable moment, or whether they're really asking you a question. And then I find step 3 to be hugely important. Determine what they know. Our adult brain can, 1, panic, but 2, say, oh, now I have to explain like the history of sex assigned at birth and how gender identity is different. And they go, like, you think you have to explain the whole thing in one sitting. And oftentimes it was just like a simple thing or a simple question. So maybe they're wanting to know, maybe they ask you, how do I know if I'm a boy and a girl? And you're like, oh boy, here we go, sit down. But really they want to know, can I wear a dress to school tomorrow, right? So like figure out where the question's coming from, or, oh, where did you hear about that? Or is there something on your mind? Or maybe they read one of these books in the library today and they just saw Sparkle Boy and they've never thought about that. So to figure out where the question is coming from, I find to be hugely important with any topics. By the way, you'll see gender not anywhere on this. These are tips for how to have any courageous conversations with young people. To give a brief age-appropriate answer, and we have some resources in the back that can help you figure out maybe what kids do know at that age, or maybe where their gender identity is at that a particular age. And then to check, to kind of give a little information, check for understanding. Maybe give a little more if they're still confused, but usually it's a simple thing that satisfies their need for that moment. And then 6 is the step to not forget, is to leave the door open, to always remind them that they can always come back to you for more information, and you always want to make sure you're leaving every conversation, especially ones that can be challenging or not have a real clear answer, to know that you're a good resource to come back to. If kids know that they can't come to you, they, like I said, will get creative and find other ways to get that. And most importantly, it's okay if you don't know the answer or need more time. A lot of the questions that kids have do not have simple answers, or maybe are throwing you off. You're driving to soccer practice and all of a sudden you're explaining, stereotypes of X, Y, and Z. So totally fine to say, depending on the age of your child, maybe you can find the answer together. I love that as an option of, great question. I want to make sure we have the right information. Let's find out together. Or, wow, great question, wasn't expecting it at this time, can we talk at dinner? Or how about we touch base after school today? To buy yourself more time is always appropriate, rather than kind of like flustering through the conversation and feeling bad about it. But you could always go back to the conversation of, hey, we chatted this other time, I want to go back to it. I didn't feel like we really handled it, or I was actually misinformed. And so it's always okay to try and to go back, but it's also okay to say, I don't know, or not right now. But it's super important to tell them when you'll be having a conversation, not just, can we chat about it later, but a specific time, and then to be held accountable. So, along those lines, we have some parenting books here and more. We also have, like we said, these are just a few of the resources that we like, and so we put links to other very long lists of books around gender identity, and then also some websites that I like and some PDFs. So you'll see like a healthy gender development in young children. That goes by infants through age 6-ish, for the really young ones, about like what do they know about their gender and what age, and what can we do as educators and parents about that. Also some resources about how to talk to your children. You'll find within these there's also links to podcasts and webinars and whatever modality your learning is. I know there's a podcast that's 6 minutes long. That seems like a great drive, right? It's not an hour long. And then we heard that people were interested just in brushing up their own knowledge about language. So language changes often, and so we included some links at the bottom too, to resources that will probably update their definitions faster than we would get you a new handout. And so we use the Gender Unicorn here in school to explain the difference between sex, gender, and sexuality. On purpose, because it was developed by trans people for trans people. There is some hype in the community about the genderbread person, which people might be familiar with, or with the like, spectrums that are binary, about them being maybe plagiarized. Don't quote me about that. But that's the feeling around it. And then also that one spectrum doesn't really offer enough options. They put people at polar opposites. If you're on a gender spectrum, like boy, girl, like what's in the middle? Like neither, both. Why are they opposite? Can't you have aspects of both? So the Gender Unicorn, really for our middle school, I would say like 4th, 5th, and up, are using that model as a visual, but also to show that you can be many things. You don't need to just pick one spot on the line. So that's our very brief, very fast, lots of books and info. So we want to just open it up to you all. Questions, comments, concerns?
Well done.
They're online. If you need any of this, it's on your parent resources as well. And I included a video if you want.